Hello, a very warm welcome to Fireside Chats. My name is Magela Pillai, and today I'd like to introduce you to Sister Denise, who has been practicing Rajyoga Meditation for over 40 years. Today's topic is entitled Managing Your Personality. If this subject is of interest to you, I invite you to sit tight and enjoy the next half an hour with us, where Sister Denise will explore this subject of spirituality. In this entire series, we look at how spirituality has an impact on your life as an individual. We also look at what your relationship with God is and how we can help you using spiritual principles to deepen your relationship with God so that you have a more meaningful and real connection with Him or her. Sister Denise, a very warm welcome to today's show.
Thank you.
Managing your personality. This is a point of contention for many people, is it not?
Well, yes. I mean, people's relationship with their own personality is a little bit ambivalent. Sometimes you will think, well, nobody understands me. Then you will think, well, even I don't understand myself. Or you'll think, well, I'm totally normal, everybody else is weird. Or I think I'm normal, but nobody else does. And I think what that makes people do is look at the astrological chart to try and understand their personality according to the stars, or they will look at, psychological profiles to try and fit themselves. And then they'll say, well, I am a, Aquarian and therefore so-and-so, or I am a Cancerian and so you have to excuse my wateriness and, this type of thing. But in Raj Yoga, we look at it in a little bit different way. And that is really looking at the sanskaras. So sanskaras are, on one hand, you would say the sanskaras are the grooves left by tracks of karma. And so you will move according to those grooves. Also, sanskaras are, if you develop a certain talents, certain capacities, or you pursue certain arts or certain professions, and then you have an aptitude for that. So this then becomes part of your personality. Then there's another attribute of personality which is to do with charisma. And so a person who is very charismatic would be said to be a personality, almost like the way you would use the term celebrity. And there are people who get on with being what they are and they become celebrities and they have to deal with being a celebrity. Or there are other people, they feel that they are nobody, they want to be somebody, but they don't know which somebody to be. So there's a lot of confusion connected with that, and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of feeling as though you're moving around in the dark. Anyway, a personality is made up of many attributes. You have your dark side, your light side, your scientific side, your artistic side, your internalized orientation, your external orientation. There are many different pairs of opposites, you can say, within your personality. Some people, they're extremists, and so then they have to deal with the extremes. Some people are very multifaceted, very deep, very intense, and on the one hand it's very interesting to be like that, and on the other hand it's very hard work to manage yourself. It's definitely hard work for other people to manage you. I think ultimately it's all to do with finding yourself. And one of the things that I hear a lot these days is, people want to be authentic. I want to be the real me. I don't know which of all these internal personalities is the real me, but I want to be real. I don't want to be somebody that somebody else makes me be, because that's not the real me, you know?
If one has decided to embark on a path that's not necessarily spiritual, but where you want to manage your own internal world, where on earth do you begin?
I think that there's like a note on the musical scale that corresponds to you. And if you can strike that note and, you know, play that note, resonate with that note, everything sort of revolves around that. So it becomes your point of departure and the point to which you return. And I think that's a very good way to approach it. But how do you touch that note?
I'm glad you asked that. That would have been my next question. Yeah.
Well, you have to really go deep into yourself, deep into silence, actually, to hear that note.
Okay.
So it definitely does express itself from the deep silence.
Now, if you have a superficial understanding of your likes and your dislikes and your preferences, that's not tantamount to self-knowledge, is it? That's just this part of you, and there's a lot more to you. How do you access your own depths, especially if silence is a brand new phenomena to you, okay? And more especially if you're afraid of, like most people, you've never been really by yourself. If you have Sunday where you have nothing to do, after you wash the car, you park up in front of the television. How does one get to that point where you sit down and ask yourself, who am I really? And you get these answers.
The circumstances which will provoke the introspection that results in some sort of answers are circumstances of great difficulty. Because when things are easygoing, we don't think about anything. You just enjoy being easygoing. It's only really when things really go wrong or you get really confused that you start to really take a look. You know, one thing that happens, a lot of the people in this world are addictive personalities, and many are full-blown addicts. And when you are a full-blown addict or a becoming full-blown addict, you know, a circumstance arises where you kind of crash. And that crash is an opportunity to really take stock and take a look. And an interesting thing that you find about the addictive people or the full-blown addicts is addiction is a symptom of someone who is really highly spiritual, but who's totally depleted, spiritually devoid. So you're highly spiritual but totally empty. You're a full-on addict, so that crash will put you face to face with God, face to face with death, face to face with the awful truth about yourself, and this can be sufficiently shocking to wake you up.
Sister Denise, a part and parcel of managing one's personality is knowing and feeling that there was trauma experienced by the soul in this lifetime, which is the experience of many, trauma on many levels, pain on many levels. How does one come to terms with all of that? Because I think that would be the most challenging thing to deal with. And human nature is such that if you experience something in 1974 that was traumatic, it's still traumatic for you today, because you keep reliving the trauma and the negative experience. Even though it's just a memory, it's still an active memory, and every time you remember it, you become re-traumatized.
Well, it's even more than that, because your trauma sits in your subconscious and it drives everything. There's more than just a memory. It's really the motor of your soul, which has absolutely displaced your sense of self.
Yeah, I once heard it said that if somebody experiences a trauma, the traumatic episode becomes part of their identity. Okay? You'll call yourself a something like a tsunami survivor, and becomes part of who you are. And so tell us how one brings oneself out of that.
You don't really come out of it, but what you do is you go into it and you return to your essential self, and then you come back through it and you use this traumatic experience as a source of strength.
How? It's you give me the short answer. I implore you for the details. Nothing, Sister Denise, about what you just said is remotely simple, because one is working with pain.
You're working with pain, you're working with shock, you're working with experiences that should never happen to a human being, or you've seen things that a human being should never see, but you did, and you survived, and it did something to you that maybe destroyed your innocence. It's like it's a big scar on your soul. A very good way, not an easy way, but a very good way is you have to go back, because the time when you decide to deal with it is way beyond the traumatic moment. Mm-hmm. And so if you decide you want to do that, it's like you want to reclaim yourself, because the trauma took you away from yourself.
The trauma took you away from yourself. So your journey will be to return to the self.
Yes.
Okay, tell us how you do that.
Because the trauma drives your behavior, the way you feel about things, the way you interpret things, and so on, you have to do a lot of exercises to understand what the patterns are. And the patterns become like roadways that enable you to go back, because what you need to do is make contact again with the original pain. You got to relive it. When you relive it, you are releasing the extreme, emotions and feelings and experiences that got locked or frozen into your soul. Because until and unless you release them and unlock them, there's no fluidity. And so this, of course, requires a lot of courage, a lot of strength. But you go back in there and you remake contact. Usually it's rather good if you have somebody to accompany you, because it's a very scary place to go. And a good therapist can do that. And then you find again your original self. And when you do that, that opens up the doorway for you to find your connection to God. And then with God and your adult self, you can say, you bring that traumatized self back to the present moment. And then you say, okay, here we are, now where? And a person who can do that, is dehumanizing, but when you do that, you become superhuman. So then you're able to do something that regular people can't do. So that means that you do something with God, for God, as an instrument for God, that is beyond the capacity of a, you can say, normal, non-traumatized person. So that's quite interesting.
Sister Denise, trauma and pain, does it serve a purpose?
I always think of pain as a messenger and trauma as an opportunity.
Messenger of what? Opportunity for what?
Pain is a messenger that tells you you've got something that you are able to get. So you have to go and get it. It's like a treasure. You somehow become qualified to make extraordinary discoveries. And trauma is an opportunity for that because it affords you a way into a dimension of being which is beyond the normal, you see. And so, you know, the everyday reality is this little bit of reality. And when you experience a trauma, it pushes you to another place and it disconnects you from the idea that this is all there is. But it also separates you from the rest of the world who say that this is all there is. And you can no longer operate the way other people do, so you lose your functionality in that dimension. You are, in one way broken, and in another way you are catapulted onto a different space, which means that if you can hold yourself together psychologically and spiritually, you're in a very different place. You're not afraid of evil. You're not afraid of death. You're not afraid of pain. You're not like other people anymore, you see. And so God comes along and says, okay, well, there are things that you can understand because of your experience, and so you can help people to understand that too, because you've been there, you know.
That was a wow. Sister Denise, tell me, in the normal day-to-day working of life, you are dealing with inner conflict, you're dealing with issues of the past, you're dealing with personality traits that are in conflict with each other. Okay? How do you maintain equilibrium in the face of all of that? It's almost like being a parent with 5 or 6 extremely naughty children.
This is the thing, you have to come to terms with yourself, and I think that a soul is an actor. I come into various situations where I will need different capacities. This idea of being an actor, I think, is helpful for allowing you to reconcile parts of yourself that don't seem to be able to be reconciled under the normal lens, you know. But if you start to look at it through a different lens, maybe a wider angle lens, you begin to see where those things can be seen as coherent, operating together. You know, people have a lot of preconceptions. You know, if you're this, then you have to be this. You know, they box you in. How many people are there who are actually like any of the stereotypes? I don't see that there are very many, because the human personality is very complex. But prevailing social attitudes tend to give you the message that you cannot be this way, and this way, because nobody is. Well, that's not true. People are. Some people are. And so I think, you know, to give yourself the permission to be all of these different characters, the aspect that gives coherence to the totality of you is the angle you have on yourself. If you are under the influence of conventional morality, you'll be in trouble. But if you look at yourself from the angle of your conscience, you'll be better off.
Why the conscience?
Because your conscience is quite reliable, and it's able to tell you things that are much more subtle than the messages you get from conventional morality. Because you say, all right, well, I'm an artist, so I have to have all of these, freedoms, and I'm eccentric, so, and I'm also a mathematician, and I'm also a parent, and I'm also a yogi, and I'm also a business person. And people say, well, you can't have that. And because of these preconceptions, you see, but your conscience will say, yeah, you can. You can find a coherent thread that links all of these parts of you and says, yeah, all of these parts are there and they are all operating, and you can find the coherence. They're not incompatible with each other the way they operate within you, but the conventional morality will not have a template for that. But your conscience is able to tell you, it's all right. We can reconcile all these things, no problem.
God, where does he fit into this picture? Can you have a relationship with God if there is, world war going on inside here?
Well, I don't know whether it's necessarily world war going on inside here. Sometimes there is. But, I think from God's angle, every single person on earth is vastly different from every other one. Whereas generally human beings like to think of people as very, very similar. You make general categories and you put people in those categories, and even if they don't fit, you kind of force them in and require them to fit, which God doesn't do. God says, this is you, and that's how you are, and this is you, and that's how you are. And God really doesn't have a problem with it. It's people that have a problem with it. And I think that when you have your independent personal connection with God, you can actually slip away from the limitations of the conventional views of what you can or cannot be. And in your development of your relationship with God, you realize that those are very artificial constraints. Mm-hmm. And then you become more and more free.
Okay, so your message is, irrespective of how much is going on in here, and irrespective of how much is weighing you down in terms of other people and your own personality, you can heal from that?
I don't know whether it's necessarily a matter of healing from it. I think in some ways it's a matter of affirming that my personality is like this, and if it doesn't fit into somebody's preconception, that's too bad. So you're affirming your individuality, and you're saying, I'm right with myself, I'm right with God, and I don't fit into all these boxes, but that's that. But then, of course, you're on your own. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be willing to be that, because if you are unwilling to be in any of these boxes that the world likes to put you in, then you have to be by yourself. And the world is generally quite unkind to people who don't agree to be boxed. You may be very unusual, you may be very special, but it doesn't mean that you're not okay, So you have to look at your criteria for what is all right and what is not all right. And then, put yourself in front of God, put yourself in front of yourself. Don't worry too much about public opinion. It's very fickle.
Thank you, and goodbye to you for now. So there you go, the art of managing your personality. Whether you are a child or an adult, this subject is of interest to everyone. The question that I'm asking you is, do you know how to effectively manage your personality? Do you have traits within you that are conflicting? Is there a conflict between your inner world and your opinion of yourself as opposed to what other people think of you? Are you right with God? Sister Denise has shared her answers on all of these various aspects of managing the personality, and she gave us very interesting and relevant tools as to how we can achieve this. So I do hope that you were able to find something of use in today's episode, and irrespective of what you are, no matter how different you may be from the people around you, even though being isolated and being alone has been your reality, please understand that you have the right to be who you are and who you want to be. And I wish you luck on your spiritual journey. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.